And the rescued kids range in ages from 17 to just under 2 years old.
At 3:18 a.m., the street outside the Houston boarding school was silent. No traffic, no voices, no sign that anything was about to happen. Then, without warning, the stillness broke. Unmarked vehicles rolled in from every direction, headlights cutting through the darkness before shutting off almost in unison.
Get down! Get down! Get down! With you! Need one!
Doors opened quietly. Shadows moved with purpose. Within seconds, the perimeter was sealed.
This is an elite FBI team dedicated to finding missing kids.
This wasn't a routine inspection, it was a federal operation. Agents moved fast, spreading across the property with precision. Teams took positions at every entrance. Surveillance drones lifted silently overhead, feeding live images to command units staged several blocks away. From the outside, the campus looked ordinary. Manicured lawns, well-lit hallways, neatly maintained buildings. The kind of place parents trusted. The kind of place no one questioned. But inside, something was wrong. For months, investigators had been tracking unusual financial activity connected to the school. Nothing overt, no alarms, just numbers that didn't make sense. Payments routed through layered accounts, donations that appeared and disappeared, expenses that didn't match enrollment or staffing levels. At first, it looked like poor bookkeeping. Then, the patterns emerged. The same payment structures appeared again and again. The same offshore intermediaries. The same shell entities used to move money quietly and efficiently. It wasn't chaos, it was design. When analysts cross-referenced the financial data with shipping records, the picture became clearer. Deliveries labeled as educational materials were arriving at odd hours. Some never appeared on official inventory lists. Others were rerouted internally without documentation. That's when surveillance began. Over several weeks, federal teams observed activity that didn't match any normal academic schedule. Restricted areas no student could access. Individuals entering and leaving without identification. Doors that stayed locked at all hours. The deeper investigators looked, the more the school began to resemble something else entirely. By the time the decision was made to move in, officials knew this was no longer a compliance issue. It was an operation. At precisely 3:18 a.m., the order was given. Entry teams moved in simultaneously from multiple access points. Communications were cut. Security systems were disabled. Within minutes, the entire property was under federal control. Inside, agents discovered concealed rooms behind false walls, storage areas filled with sealed containers, encrypted devices hidden in ventilation shafts and ceiling panels, financial records pointing to transactions totaling more than $4.1 million. But the most shocking discovery came moments later. Inside the dormitory wings, investigators found 89 children. Some were asleep, others were awake, confused, and frightened. Many believed they were enrolled in a legitimate academic program. Few understood why federal agents were suddenly surrounding them. Medical teams were rushed in immediately. Child welfare officials followed close behind. Every child was removed safely and placed into protective care. What investigators realized in that moment changed the entire scope of the operation. This wasn't just a financial crime. It wasn't just an illegal operation hiding behind paperwork. It was a system that used legitimacy as camouflage and children as its shield. And as dawn broke over the quiet Houston street, one thing became clear. This was only the beginning. As dawn broke over the sealed campus, the reality of what investigators had uncovered began to sink in. The children were safely removed and transported to secure facilities. But for the agents left behind, the real work was only beginning. What looked like a single illicit operation was already unraveling into something far larger, something designed to exist quietly, efficiently, and for a very long time. Inside a temporary command center set up just blocks away, analysts began combing through the data seized during the raid. Laptops, encrypted drives, and hidden servers were cataloged and brought online in controlled environments. Within minutes, patterns began to appear. This wasn't random. Every system inside the facility followed the same structure: identical file hierarchies, identical encryption protocols, identical naming conventions. Whoever built it had done so with precision, discipline, and a long-term plan. The deeper analysts went, the more unsettling the picture became. Transaction records showed funds moving through a web of shell entities spread across multiple states. Each transfer was small enough to avoid detection, yet together they formed a steady flow of millions of dollars. The money moved through nonprofits, consulting firms, and educational trusts, all legally registered, all appearing legitimate. But when cross-referenced, the connections were unmistakable. This was not a local operation, it was a network. Further analysis revealed that the Houston site functioned as a regional hub, a staging ground used to process materials, manage logistics, and route resources to other locations. Several of those locations were already flagged by analysts as points of interest, though none had previously been linked together. Now they were. As investigators traced communications between the nodes, timestamps revealed synchronized activity. Messages were short, coded, and designed to disappear. Some referenced contingency protocols, others referenced fallback locations and phase transitions. The implication was chilling. This organization had planned for exposure. It had rehearsed how to survive it. By mid-morning, the task force expanded. Additional agencies were looped in. Warrants were quietly prepared in multiple jurisdictions. Surveillance assets were redirected. Everything moved quickly, but carefully. No public statements, no leaks. Meanwhile, teams at the Houston site made another discovery. Hidden behind a secured access panel was a compact operations room containing schedules, movement logs, and internal training materials. These weren't instructions for a school or educational program. They were operational manuals. Some documents detailed how to screen individuals. Others outlined protocols for maintaining secrecy. A few contained contingency instructions in the event of external compromise. The language was calm, professional, methodical. It was clear the people behind this operation didn't see themselves as criminals. They saw themselves as managers of a system. As the scope of the discovery expanded, so did the urgency. The possibility that similar facilities existed elsewhere could no longer be ignored. By late afternoon, federal teams were preparing to act on new intelligence. Addresses were being verified. Surveillance teams were redeployed. A national coordination call was scheduled for that evening. Because if the Houston location was only one node in a larger structure, then time was no longer on their side. And somewhere, the people behind it all were already making their next move. While much of the public attention focused on the scale of the operation, for investigators on the ground, the most urgent priority was the children. Inside the facility, agents discovered 89 minors who had been living under strict supervision. They were not restrained, but their movement, communication, and access to the outside world had been tightly controlled. Many believed they were enrolled in a specialized academic program. Others had been told their families were part of a long-term educational placement. What authorities found was deeply concerning, not because of visible harm, but because of systematic isolation. The children had limited outside contact. Their communication was monitored. Their schedules were rigid. Several had no access to phones or independent contact with family members. Educational material was tightly curated and inconsistent with standard academic curricula. Most had no idea where they truly were. Within hours of the operation, specialized child protection teams were brought in. Medical professionals conducted evaluations. Trauma counselors were assigned. Every child was separated from the investigative process and placed into protective care. Importantly, investigators emphasized that none of the children were treated as suspects. They were considered potential victims, individuals placed into an environment they did not choose and could not leave. As interviews progressed, a troubling pattern emerged. Many of the children had been brought to the facility through legal channels, exchange programs, academic sponsorships, or guardianship agreements that, on paper, appeared legitimate. Parents or guardians believed they were sending them to elite educational institutions. What they didn't know was how tightly controlled the environment truly was. Authorities believed the program's real purpose was twofold: to maintain the appearance of legitimacy and to provide operational cover for the facility's deeper activities. The presence of students created a shield, something that made scrutiny less likely and intervention more complicated. That discovery changed the tone of the entire investigation. What had begun as a financial and logistical probe became a child protection case with national implications. Federal agencies coordinated with social services, education authorities, and family advocacy groups to ensure the children were relocated safely and discreetly. Counseling services were arranged, reunification efforts began where possible, and as details emerged, a troubling truth came into focus. The operation didn't rely on violence to function. It relied on trust. Trust from parents, trust from communities, trust from systems designed to protect. That betrayal, investigators say, may be the most serious offense of all. As the case moves forward, officials have emphasized one thing above all else. The children were not just collateral in a criminal operation. They were the reason the investigation became urgent, and they are the reason it will not quietly disappear. By the time dawn broke the next morning, the scope of the operation had expanded far beyond anything investigators initially expected. What began as a single raid had evolved into a national response. Inside federal command centers, analysts worked through the night, cross-referencing names, transactions, and travel histories pulled from the seized data. Patterns emerged quickly, financial routes overlapped, communication methods repeated. The same digital signatures appeared across systems that, on the surface, had nothing to do with one another. The realization was unsettling. This wasn't a single operation hiding behind a school. It was a network designed to look ordinary, dispersed, compartmentalized, and invisible unless viewed as a whole. As daylight spread across the country, warrants were executed in multiple states. Offices were sealed. Storage facilities were entered. Digital accounts were frozen mid-transfer. Every action was coordinated to prevent the network from reacting or erasing evidence. Inside one facility, investigators found a mirrored archive of the Houston data. Identical structures, identical encryption, identical contingency plans. The operation had been designed to survive exposure. If one location fell, others would continue. But this time, they had moved too late. The synchronized response shut down communication lines faster than the system could adapt. Servers went dark. Financial flows froze. What had once functioned as a silent, efficient machine was suddenly fragmented. As the hours passed, the scale of what had been prevented became clearer. The network wasn't simply moving money or managing logistics, it was positioning itself to expand, quietly embedding into trusted institutions, exploiting oversight gaps, and operating under the protection of legitimacy. And then came the confirmation no one wanted, but everyone expected. Investigators determined that the operation had been planning to grow, not in one city, not even one state, nationally. The children rescued from the Houston site were never meant to stay there permanently. They were part of a broader system designed to replicate itself, location by location, under the cover of legitimate organizations. That revelation changed everything. By mid-afternoon, emergency directives were issued across multiple federal agencies. Oversight procedures were tightened. Emergency funding was redirected. Specialized teams were mobilized to audit institutions previously considered low risk. The operation had crossed a line. This wasn't just criminal activity, it was a systemic abuse of trust on a national scale. As the investigation entered its final phase, one truth became undeniable. The threat had not come from the shadows, but from structures people trusted every day. And while this network had been disrupted, officials knew others could exist, hidden behind paperwork, reputations, and carefully crafted appearances. That realization became the lasting impact of the case. Not fear, awareness, because the most dangerous threats aren't always the ones that announce themselves. They're the ones that blend in, until someone finally looks closely enough to see them. And this time, someone did. If you want to stay ahead of the stories they don't want you to see, subscribe now. More investigations are already unfolding. In the next one, we'll go even deeper. Stay alert, stay informed, and don't miss what comes next.